The morning sky over Seoul looked different that day. Do-won was the first person to notice the strange light above the city. He stood at his office window, coffee cup in hand, watching what looked like a falling star in the bright morning sky. But stars don't fall in the morning. The light grew bigger and brighter. Soon, everyone in the city could see it. News channels started showing the same thing happening all over the world. A large ship, unlike anything built on Earth, was entering the atmosphere. The world's governments tried to stay calm. They sent messages to the ship in all Earth's languages. Hours passed with no answer. Then, just as the sun was setting, the ship sent back a simple message in perfect English. "We come seeking help. Please." The ship landed in an empty field outside Seoul. It was huge, about the size of 3 football fields, and had a silver-blue color that seemed to change in the light. Steam came out from its sides, showing that something was wrong with it. Do-won, who worked as a translator for the Korean government, was one of the first people called to the landing site. He stood with a group of world leaders and scientists, watching as a door opened in the side of the ship. The aliens that came out looked almost human, but their skin had a slight blue tint, and their eyes were larger. They walked slowly, as if they were very tired. Their leader, who later told them his name, looked straight at the human group and did something unexpected. He bowed deeply, in the traditional Korean style. "We are the Erebus," he said in that same perfect English. "We are dying. Our entire species is dying from a disease we cannot cure. We have traveled far because we learned that humans might be able to help us." The world leaders looked confused. Humans were far behind the Erebus in space travel and technology. "Why us?" asked the Korean president. "We are not as advanced as you." The alien leader smiled weakly. "That is exactly why. Your species has survived countless diseases. Your bodies are strong in ways ours are not. We have watched you for years. You fight. You adapt. You survive. We need that strength now." Do-won translated everything carefully, amazed at what he was hearing. Here was an advanced alien race, coming to Earth not to conquer or teach, but to ask for help. The Erebus showed them data about their plague. It had already killed millions of their people. Their best scientists couldn't stop it. They had traveled for 3 years to reach Earth, hoping that human medical knowledge might save them. As the sun set on that historic day, Do-won watched as human doctors started working with the Erebus visitors. He saw how careful everyone was, making sure the disease couldn't spread to humans. But he also saw something else, the look of hope in the aliens' eyes when they watched the human doctors work. That night, as he drove home, Do-won thought about how strange life could be. All the movies and books had it wrong. The aliens didn't come to invade. They didn't come to save humans from themselves. They came because they needed help, showing that even the most advanced beings in the galaxy could be humbled by something as small as a virus. The next morning, when Do-won returned to the landing site, he knew he was part of something that would change human history forever. Earth's first contact with aliens had begun not with a war or a grand revelation, but with a simple request for help, and a chance for humanity to show its true strength. Dr. Hae-yun looked through her microscope for the 100th time that day. She had been studying the Erebus plague for 2 weeks now, working in a special laboratory built just for this research. The sight still amazed her. The virus that was killing the Erebus looked nothing like any human disease she had ever seen. "It's beautiful in a terrible way," she said to herself, making more notes in her tablet. The laboratory was inside a secure building near the Erebus ship. Every day, more sick aliens arrived, hoping for help. Every day, Hae-yun and her team worked harder to find answers. One morning, while looking at blood samples, Hae-yun noticed something strange. The Erebus blood cells were different from human ones, but they responded to human antibodies in an unexpected way. She called her team over to look. "See how the human antibodies are attacking the virus?" she asked, pointing to her screen. "Our immune system recognizes it as an enemy, even though it's an alien disease." Her discovery sparked new hope. The Erebus scientists, who had been watching the humans work, came closer to see. Their lead scientist looked shocked. "This is impossible," he said. "Your primitive immune systems shouldn't be able to fight our diseases. We evolved on different worlds." He-Yun smiled. "Maybe that's why it works. Human bodies have fought so many diseases over thousands of years. Our immune systems had to become very strong and flexible." She explained her idea to use modified human antibodies to help the Erebus fight the plague. It was a simple solution, but sometimes the simplest answers were the best ones. The next few days were busy with tests. He-Yun barely slept, working late into the night. She knew that every hour they spent working meant more Erebus lives could be saved. One test showed great promise. They gave the modified antibodies to a very sick Erebus patient. Everyone watched anxiously. After 3 days, the patient's condition improved. It wasn't a cure yet, but it was the first real progress anyone had made against the plague. News of the breakthrough spread quickly. More human scientists came to help, bringing new ideas and equipment. The Erebus were surprised by how quickly humans could adapt and improvise. "Your species is unusual," one Erebus scientist told He-Yun. "You don't follow standard procedures. You try new things that shouldn't work, but somehow they do." He-Yun thought about this while working late one night. The Erebus were right. Humans were different. They didn't always follow the rules. They made mistakes but learned from them. Maybe these things that the Erebus saw as weaknesses were actually strengths. She looked at her latest test results and felt hope growing stronger. The modified antibodies were working better than expected. They hadn't found the complete cure yet, but they were getting closer every day. As she prepared to go home that night, He-Yun stopped to look at the Erebus ship through her laboratory window. She thought about how far these beings had traveled, hoping that humans could help them. They had put their trust in a younger, less advanced species because they had run out of options. "We won't let you down," she whispered, touching the window glass. "Humans don't give up easily. That's one thing you can count on." The lights in her laboratory stayed on as other scientists continued working through the night. The race to save the Erebus had only just begun, but humanity was proving that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. Jai-Ho's job was to help the Erebus understand humans, and to help humans understand the Erebus. As a cultural attaché, he spent his days with both species, learning that they were more alike than different. One morning, he sat with an Erebus family in their temporary home near Seoul. They were sharing a meal together, something that had become common as scientists confirmed that human and Erebus food was safe to share. "Your cooking methods are interesting," said the Erebus father, carefully using chopsticks to pick up some rice. "On our world, we usually eat everything raw." Jai-Ho watched as their young child tried to use the chopsticks, failing but laughing. The sound was just like a human child's laughter. These moments helped everyone remember that despite their differences, both species shared basic feelings and needs. In the afternoon, Jai-Ho led a group of Erebus visitors through a Korean traditional market. The aliens were fascinated by everything they saw. They stopped to watch an old woman making rice cakes, their large eyes wide with wonder. "Your people make things by hand," one Erebus observed. "We stopped doing that centuries ago. Everything is made by machines now." The old woman at the stall, who had been nervous at first, smiled and offered them samples. The Erebus tried the rice cakes carefully, then broke into wide smiles. Soon, other vendors were offering their foods too. The market became a place where two worlds met over simple, shared pleasures. Later that week, Jai-Ho organized a cultural exchange event at a local school. Erebus children sat with human children, drawing pictures and learning each other's games. One Erebus child drew a picture of their home world, 3 suns in the sky and tall, crystal buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. "Do you miss home?" a human child asked. The Erebus child nodded. "But Earth is nice too. You have so many different things here. On our world, everything is the same." Jaiho wrote these observations in his daily report. The Erebus were learning that Earth's variety, in its people, its cultures, its ways of life, was not a weakness but a strength. Their own world had become too uniform, too controlled. Perhaps this was why they struggled to fight the plague that was killing them. One evening, as Jaiho was finishing his work, an Erebus elder asked to speak with him. They sat in a quiet garden, watching the sunset. "We came here thinking we were superior," the elder said. "We thought humans were primitive because you still had wars, poverty, and disagreements. But now we see that these challenges have made you stronger. You learn to adapt, to change, to find new solutions." Jaiho nodded. "Every human culture is different, but we all learn from each other. Maybe that's what your people need too, to remember that different isn't bad. Different is how we grow." The elder looked at the sky, where the first stars were appearing. "Our children who were born here, who are growing up with human children, they will be different from us. They will know both worlds. Perhaps they will help us build a better future." As night fell, Jaiho thought about how this cultural exchange was changing both species. The Erebus were learning that progress wasn't just about technology, and humans were learning that they had valuable things to teach, even to beings from the stars. Together, they were writing a new chapter in the story of both their species. It was a story about finding strength in differences and hope in unexpected places. Taiwan rushed through the laboratory hallways, carrying his latest research findings. The young researcher had been working late again, studying how the Erebus plague was changing. What he discovered made his heart race with worry. The plague was getting stronger. The human antibodies that had been helping the Erebus were becoming less effective. The virus was changing faster than anyone had expected. He found Dr. He-yun in her office, still working despite the late hour. "Doctor, you need to see this," he said, showing her his data on the computer screen. He-yun's face grew serious as she studied the numbers. "The virus is learning," she said quietly. "It's adapting to our treatment." They called an emergency meeting. Soon, the laboratory was filled with both human and Erebus scientists. Taiwan explained what he had found, using simple diagrams to show how the virus was changing. "But there's something else," he said, pointing to another set of data. "I've been studying human DNA samples from different parts of the world. Each group of humans has different genetic resistances to disease. It's because humans lived in different places and faced different challenges throughout history." The Erebus scientists looked confused. One of them spoke up. "Our species all share the same genetic pattern. We controlled our evolution centuries ago to make everyone the same." Taiwan nodded. "And that might be the problem. Humans are all different. When a disease attacks us, some people might get very sick, but others might naturally fight it off. These differences help our species survive." He showed them more data. Different human populations had developed different immunities over thousands of years. African populations had resistance to certain diseases. European populations had resistance to others. Asian populations had their own unique strengths. Our primitive past, all our struggles to survive in different environments, made us stronger, Taiwan explained. "We didn't control our evolution like you did. We let nature make us different. And now those differences might save your people." The room was quiet as everyone understood what this meant. The Erebus had made themselves too perfect, too similar. They had no variety in their genes to help them fight new threats. "We need to use human genetic diversity to create a better treatment," Taiwan said. "Not just antibodies from one group, but from many different human populations." Dr. He-yun stood up. "We need to call every major research center on Earth. We need blood samples from as many different human populations as possible. Our differences are going to be our strength." The next few hours were busy with calls and messages going out across the world. Research centers from every continent responded, offering to help. The Erebus watched in amazement as humans from all over the planet worked together, sending their different genetic materials to help find a cure. As morning came, Taiwan looked at the samples arriving from around the world. Each one represented a different part of humanity's long journey of survival. Each one carried the strength that came from being different. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places, he said to himself, preparing to start the new tests. The race to save the Erebus had entered a new phase, and humanity's greatest weakness, its uncontrolled, diverse evolution, was becoming its greatest strength. The United Nations building in New York had never been so crowded. Secretary General Sun Mai stood at the podium, looking out at the unusual gathering. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat beside delegates from the Erebus civilization. The world was watching. Television cameras broadcast the special session to billions of people. Screens showed crowds gathering in cities across the planet. Humans and Erebus standing together, waiting to hear what Earth's leaders would say. Sun Mai began her speech slowly, choosing her words with care. 3 months ago, the Erebus came to Earth asking for our help. Today, we give them our answer. She paused, looking at the Erebus ambassador. His blue-tinted skin had grown paler as their plague continued to spread. But there was still hope in his large eyes. Throughout human history, we have faced many challenges. Disease, war, natural disasters. Each time, we survived because we worked together. Today, we face a different kind of challenge. We must help save not just ourselves, but another species. The room was completely silent. Sun Mai continued, her voice growing stronger. Our scientists have made progress. They have discovered that human diversity, our different genetic patterns, our various immunities, might hold the key to saving the Erebus. She turned to face the cameras directly. Therefore, on behalf of all nations of Earth, I make this promise. Humanity will not rest until we find a cure for the Erebus plague. We will share our resources, our knowledge, and our strength. The Erebus ambassador stood up, his hands shaking. This was not what his people had expected when they came to Earth. They had hoped for help. But this was more. This was a complete commitment from an entire planet. We will establish research centers around the world, Sun Mai announced. We will gather genetic samples from every human population. We will combine our different strengths to fight this disease. This is humanity's promise to the Erebus. She then did something unexpected. She stepped down from the podium and walked to the Erebus ambassador. She held out her hand in the traditional human gesture of agreement. The ambassador looked at her hand for a moment. Then he reached out and took it. The entire assembly hall burst into applause. On screens around the world, crowds cheered. After the ceremony, Sun Mai met with the Erebus ambassador in a quiet room. Your people must understand, she said, this will not be easy or quick. But humans are stubborn. When we make a promise, we keep it. The ambassador nodded. In all our years of space travel, we never imagined this. We thought Earth was too divided, too primitive. We were wrong. Your differences make you stronger than we ever understood. That evening, as Sun Mai looked out over the New York skyline, she thought about the day's events. Humanity had just made its first promise to another species. It was a big responsibility, but she knew humans would keep their word. They would find a way to save the Erebus, not because they had to, but because they had promised they would. The lights of the city glowed brightly in the darkness, matching the determination in her heart. A new chapter in human history had begun, one where Earth's people would prove that their greatest strength lay in their willingness to help others, even those from the stars. Dr. Min Ki had not slept properly in days. The international research team was working around the clock in their Seoul laboratory. Time was running out. Every day, more reports came in about Erebus ships arriving at Earth, carrying sick passengers who needed help. He looked at the wall of screens showing data from research centers around the world. Scientists from every continent were sending in their results. They were testing different combinations of human antibodies and genetic materials, trying to find the right mixture to fight the evolving plague. Dr. Min Ki called one of his assistants. The samples from the Amazon tribes have arrived. Min Ki hurried to the containment room. These samples were special. The indigenous people of the Amazon had unique immunities that might help create a stronger treatment. Their isolated communities had developed different defenses against disease over thousands of years. As he worked, Min-Ki thought about the Erebus patients in the medical wing next door. Their condition was getting worse. The original treatment was losing its effectiveness, just as Taiwan had predicted. They needed a breakthrough soon. The African samples are showing promising results, Dr. He-Yun announced, entering the laboratory. She looked as tired as Min-Ki felt. When we combine them with the Polynesian genetic markers, the resistance to the virus increases by 40%. This was good news, but not good enough. They needed a complete cure, not just a temporary treatment. The Erebus plague was still changing, still finding ways to overcome their solutions. Min-Ki's computer beeped with an incoming call. It was from a research team in Norway. They had been studying the genetic patterns of Northern European populations, looking for clues in their ancient resistance to cold and disease. We found something interesting, the Norwegian scientists said. When we combine genetic materials from extremely different human populations, the effectiveness increases dramatically. It's like each population contributes a different piece of the puzzle. Min-Ki immediately understood what this meant. They had been testing samples from similar populations together. Instead, they needed to combine the most different ones. The greater the genetic distance between the populations, the stronger the potential cure might be. He shared this insight with teams around the world. Soon, laboratories everywhere were trying new combinations. Australian Aboriginal samples were combined with Inuit ones. East African genetic patterns were mixed with South American ones. Each combination taught them something new about fighting the plague. The work was difficult. Many attempts failed. But the scientists kept trying, encouraged by messages of support from both humans and Erebus. Children sent drawings to the laboratories. People brought food to the tired researchers. The whole world was cheering them on. One evening, as Min-Ki was checking his latest results, he found Dr. He-Yun staring at the Erebus ship visible from their window. "Do you think we'll succeed?" she asked quietly. Min-Ki nodded. "We have to. Not just because we promised, but because this is what humans do best. We take impossible problems and keep trying until we solve them." He turned back to his work, determination renewed. The race against time continued, but humanity's unwillingness to give up was proving to be their greatest asset. Even the Erebus were learning something from watching the humans work. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simple determination. The young Erebus scientist who now called herself Yoonji sat in the main laboratory, studying the latest test results. After living on Earth for months, she had adopted not just a Korean name, but also many human ways of thinking. Unlike other Erebus scientists, she had learned to question everything and try new approaches. It was late at night when she noticed something strange in the data. The human genetic combinations were working better than expected, but only at certain times. She called Dr. He-Yun over to look at her findings. "See this pattern?" Yoonji pointed to her screen. "The treatment works best when the human genes are introduced slowly in a specific order. It's like telling a story to the immune system, not giving it all the information at once." He-Yun looked closely at the data. What Yoonji had found was different from anything they had tried before. Instead of mixing all the human genetic materials together, they could introduce them one by one, letting the Erebus body learn from each new addition. "It's like how humans learn to survive diseases over time," He-Yun said, growing excited. "We didn't develop all our immunities at once. We gained them slowly, over thousands of years." The two scientists worked through the night, testing their new theory. They started with genetic material from African populations, the oldest human genetic lines. Then they added others in the order that humans had spread across the Earth. Each addition made the treatment stronger. By morning, they had their first successful test result. An Erebus blood sample had completely fought off the plague virus. It wasn't just surviving, it was winning. They quickly shared their discovery with other research teams around the world. Dr. Min-Ki and his team confirmed their results. The breakthrough was real. "This is what we've been looking for," Min-ki said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "We weren't just giving the Erebus our genetic strength. We're teaching their bodies how to adapt and change, just like humans did." The news spread quickly through the research center. Scientists who had been working for months without a break gathered to see the results. The Erebus patients in the medical wing felt new hope when they heard about the breakthrough. Yoon-ji stood with Hae-yun, watching as more test results came in from other laboratories. Each one confirmed their discovery. The treatment was working. "I could never have found this if I hadn't learned to think like a human," Yoon-ji said quietly. "Our people always look for perfect solutions. Humans taught me that sometimes you need to learn and grow slowly." Hae-yun nodded. "And we couldn't have succeeded without your understanding of Erebus biology. This cure came from both our peoples working together." The breakthrough was more than just a medical achievement. It showed that the best solutions often came from combining different ways of thinking. The Erebus had brought their advanced knowledge, while humans had contributed their history of survival and adaptation. As the sun rose over the research center, phones began ringing with calls from around the world. Everyone wanted to know about the cure. But Yoon-ji and Hae-yun were already focused on the next step, preparing the treatment for full-scale production. They had promised to save the Erebus people, and now they could keep that promise. The day marked not just a scientific victory, but a new chapter in the story of both species. Together, they had found a way forward, proving that the greatest achievements come from learning from each other. 1 year after the Erebus first landed on Earth, the world gathered to celebrate the opening of the Human Erebus Medical Research Center in Seoul. The building stood tall and proud, its design combining Earth architecture with Erebus crystal technology. Sunlight sparkled through its walls, creating rainbow patterns on the ground. Secretary General Sun Mi stood at the entrance with Do-won, who had been there on that first day when the Erebus arrived. They watched as humans and Erebus walked into the building together, no longer as separate species seeking help, but as partners working toward a shared future. "Did you ever imagine this when you first translated their message?" Sun Mi asked Do-won. "Never," he replied, remembering that morning when he saw the strange light in the sky. "I thought we were going to learn from them. Instead, we learned from each other." Inside the research center, Dr. Hae-yun and Yoon-ji were showing visitors the main laboratory. The cure they had developed was working well. Reports from Erebus worlds showed that millions of lives had been saved. But their work wasn't finished. "We're studying how human adaptability might help with other medical problems," Yoon-ji explained to a group of students. "There's so much we can learn from each other." The center had become more than just a place for medical research. It was a symbol of what different species could achieve when they worked together. Young scientists from both Earth and Erebus worlds came here to study and share ideas. In one wing of the building, Ja-ho led cultural exchange classes. He smiled as he watched human and Erebus children playing together in the center's garden. These children would grow up knowing both worlds, understanding both ways of thinking. "The children don't see differences anymore," he said to a visiting reporter. "They just see friends." The success of the cure had changed how the galaxy viewed humans. Other alien species had begun reaching out to Earth, not to offer advanced technology, but to learn about human resilience and adaptability. Earth had become known as a place where impossible problems found solutions. Dr. Min-ki, now leading a team of both human and Erebus researchers, often told visitors the story of how it all began. "The Erebus came to us thinking they were superior," he would say. "They left understanding that true strength comes in many forms. Sometimes, the youngest species have the most to teach." That evening, as the opening ceremony ended, the first stars appeared in the sky. Among them was a new light, a space station where human and Erebus ships could dock, making travel between their worlds easier. It was the first of many planned projects to bring their civilizations closer together. The Erebus ambassador, looking healthier than he had in years, stood with Earth's leaders watching the station's light move across the sky. When we first came to Earth, he said, we thought we were simply seeking help. Instead, we found a new way of seeing the universe. You taught us that strength isn't just about technology or power. It's about adapting, learning, and growing together. As night fell over the new research center, its lights glowed warmly in the darkness. Inside, humans and Erebus continued their work, searching for new ways to help both their peoples. The promise humanity had made 1 year ago had been kept, but it had grown into something more. A lasting partnership between two species who had learned that the greatest discoveries come from working together.